So let's talk about this idea that somehow willpower is what you need to get your writing done. You've probably heard that willpower is a muscle. Use it too much and it gets tired. And science mostly backs that up. When researchers gave participants a mentally taxing task, those people performed much worse on the next task they had to do, even if it had nothing to do with the first one. Their self-control just tanked. It's called ego depletion. Your brain only has so much fuel to be able to focus. And once it starts burning through that reserve, discipline gets a lot harder. Decision-making gets slower, and any distractions you might be vulnerable to get louder. Here's where it gets interesting. Not all tasks suffer the same way. There's a reason why when you're tired or burned out or feel like you're swimming in brain fog that you can still get the dishes done. That's because creative tasks, like writing, get hit harder by ego depletion. Why? Because creativity depends on flexible thinking, emotional availability, and access to new ideas, all of which require a calm, open brain. And if your brain is already under pressure, when you're stressed, tired, overscheduled, and what writer isn't overscheduled, or full of self-doubt, it clamps down. It narrows. It goes into survival mode. One recent study published in Perspectives on Psychological Science explained this perfectly. Researchers looked at what happens when your executive functions, like willpower and focus, are depleted. The more a task depends on originality and insight, like creative writing, the more vulnerable it is when your cognitive resources are low. In other words, that's just a fancy way of saying you can't force yourself into creative flow. You can't bully yourself into writing a good chapter when your brain isn't up to it. It's nearly impossible. So if you've been trying to power through a busy schedule or different types of procrastination with more pressure and more willpower, it's not your fault that that's probably not working. It's just the wrong kind of strategy for the kind of work you're trying to do. Let me show you what this looks like in real life. Let's say you had a long day, maybe at work, or you were spending time with the kids, or whatever your day entails. It's been a long day, and you finally managed to sit down at your desk at 8:30 p.m. You tell yourself, just 30 minutes, you can do this. You open your document, stare at the screen, maybe type a few words, delete them, type again, and then you feel that restless itch. You're tired, your thoughts are scattered, and suddenly you're checking email, or cleaning the sink, or vacuuming the floor. 10 minutes ago, you were determined. You were summoning all the willpower you had, but now you're defeated. That's not laziness. That's willpower burnout. And if you're a perfectionist, an avoider, or a guilty, some of the procrastination types I talk about in my new book, you'll turn that moment into character assassination. Why can't I focus? You'll say to yourself. What's wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with you. You're just using the wrong tool for the job. Willpower can get you through a chore, but it just isn't going to carry you through a creative activity. That's why you can do the dishes or throw in a load of laundry, but you can't type a paragraph to save you. So if willpower tends to run out, what can you use? Because obviously it's not like the writing's going to write itself. The good news is there is a much better approach. So I found through my research for my new book, Escape the Writer's Web, that every writer procrastinates for a different reason. So if you're stuck and you keep trying the same one-size-fits-all solution, like trying to have more willpower, you're likely solving the wrong problem. What actually works is knowing what kind of resistance you're facing and then choosing the right strategy to meet it. That's exactly why I created my procrastination framework. Because when you understand how your type of creative mind stalls out and why, you can finally stop blaming yourself and start building a writing rhythm that works. It starts with what I call the 4 procrastination quadrants. Let me tell you about those. These 4 quadrants come out of the research I did for my book and in the work I've done with other writers. And what I found changed the way that I thought about procrastination. Because most advice focuses on what you're doing wrong. But I wanted to know what's going on underneath, because I kind of suspected there was more to it. What's actually happening in the brain when a writer shuts down? And what I discovered is this. Every procrastination pattern traces back to a type of core conflict in the brain. It's a type of deeper mental friction that stalls your momentum. And that friction looks different depending on your creative wiring. But it usually fits into one of these 4 categories. I call them the 4 procrastination quadrants. Each one presents a different type of internal struggle. Once you understand which conflict you tend to fall into, you can finally choose strategies to match. And that's when procrastination starts to loosen its grip. So then the question becomes, what kind of creative friction are you dealing with? As I walk you through each of the 4 quadrants, see which one sounds most familiar to you. So let's break these down. Quadrant number 1 is called the inner critic conflict. And I imagine just the name lets you know what this one's about. This is the quadrant where fear runs the show. It's the mental tug of war between wanting to write and being terrified that it's not going to be good enough. At its core, this is a conflict between desire and doubt. You want to move forward, but your brain starts whispering all the reasons why you shouldn't. What if this is terrible? What if I'm wasting my time? What if everyone sees that I'm not very good? And here's the kicker. The more you care about your writing, the louder the critic gets. So this might show up as rewriting the same sentence or the same paragraph over and over, or having to do 25 drafts of your novel before you send it off to be edited. It might show up as avoiding starting altogether because you're already predicting that it's not going to be any good. You might pick apart anything you've done in the past until you start feeling more discouraged. You might spend hours researching instead of creating, because this fear is getting you. You might feel paralyzed by self-doubt when you try to post or promote your work. And you might abandon any projects you're working on halfway through because they're not perfect enough. So no amount of pushing or willpower is going to fix this. This block isn't about a lack of effort. It's fear, often dressed up as productivity. That's the inner critic conflict. Quadrant 2 is called the idea-action gap. This is the quadrant where inspiration and follow-through just don't connect. You've got ideas, probably dozens or hundreds of them. You're not short on imagination. But when it comes to actually sitting down and doing the thing, you freeze, flail, or bail. This is a conflict between mental momentum and grounded action. Your brain is fast, future-focused, and energized by all the possibilities. But it struggles to translate that creative energy into real-world progress. And the more ideas you have, the harder it becomes to choose, commit, and complete one. This might show up as starting a new writing project and then immediately jumping to another one, spending more time brainstorming than actually finishing, or getting overwhelmed with all the ways you could do something to the point where you actually don't do anything. It could show up as avoiding marketing because the tasks feel unclear, you're not certain what to do, or feeling a ton of energy at the start of a project and then losing it halfway through. You might constantly say, I just need to get organized first. All of these are examples of the idea-action gap. And again, discipline isn't going to fix it because the block isn't motivation, it's follow-through. Okay, but what if the issue isn't ideas or fear? What if you know what to do and you even want to do it, but you're just too depleted to keep going? Let's talk about that next. Quadrant 3 is called the energy momentum disconnect. This is the quadrant where your mind wants to write, but your body says, no thanks. It's a conflict between creative intention and physical capacity. You know what to do. You care about your work. You might even have a plan, but when it's time to execute that plan, you just don't have it in the tank. You're not avoiding your writing because you're lazy, or flaky, or undisciplined. You're avoiding it because your brain and your body might be on burnout, or just might be experiencing low capacity for some reason. And if you've been pushing hard in other areas of your life, like work or with family, caregiving, then this kind of stall is really predictable. So it might show up as sitting down to write and immediately feeling foggy, or heavy, or even sleepy, constantly saying, I'll do it when I feel more rested or caught up, or struggling to maintain your attention or momentum once you actually start, or resenting how much effort it seems to take. Maybe you write in short, irregular bursts and then you crash, or you avoid writing altogether even though you want to because it seems like just one more energy drain. That's the energy momentum disconnect. And again, discipline isn't going to fix it because the block isn't about commitment. It's about capacity. But maybe none of these have hit home yet. Maybe you're not plagued by fear, you're not scattered, and you're not exhausted either. You're just resisting. Every time someone tells you what you should be doing, something inside you pushes back. Let's talk about that next. So quadrant 4 is the autonomy tension quadrant. This is where resistance takes center stage. You want to write, you probably even have the time and the plan and the energy, and still something in you just says, This is usually because there's a conflict between your goals and your sense of agency. As soon as something feels even just a little bit forced or scheduled or imposed by someone else or something else, part of you starts pulling away. Even if the pressure's coming from you, you may be setting your own deadlines and then resisting them. And that push-pull dynamic can create a kind of passive rebellion. You keep meaning to write, but somehow you don't. So this might show up as pushing back against routines that you created, or abandoning plans the moment they feel too rigid, or feeling irritated by advice, deadlines, or writing challenges given by somebody else, even your editor, waiting for the perfect mood or the perfect sense of freedom to feel like you can write, or ignoring your to-do list until it's too late and then scrambling trying to get it done in a hurry. You might even feel stuck between wanting freedom and needing structure in your writing. That's the autonomy tension quadrant. Discipline and willpower aren't going to fix it, because the block isn't about laziness, it's resistance. So if willpower hasn't been working for you, now you know why. Procrastination isn't just a bad habit. And it doesn't just mean that we're somehow flawed as people. It's just a signal, and it points to a type of internal conflict that your creative brain is wrestling with. Once you know which quadrant you're in, you can stop blaming yourself and start using tools that actually help you move forward. If you're curious about what quadrant you fall into, you can take the free quiz that I created. It only takes a few minutes, and it'll help you spot the root of any procrastination you may be experiencing with way more clarity. Once you know your quadrant, you'll get personalized insights and strategies you can actually use. That's completely free. You can take that quiz, just click on the link in the description. If you want to go deeper with this, I've put together a toolkit with printable PDFs, charts, writing prompts, and more tailored to each specific quadrant. You can also grab my book, Escape the Writer's Web, and the accompanying workbook to understand your patterns and break free for good. But start with the free quiz. It's the first step toward writing in a way that finally works with your brain. So your mission of the week, if you choose to accept it. This week, watch for the moment when your willpower runs out. When do you start reaching for snacks, scrolling on your phone, or reorganizing your sock drawer instead of writing? Then ask yourself this: what was I feeling right before I bailed on my writing? Were you tired, foggy, overwhelmed, stressed? Were you stuck in indecision, or maybe already bracing for disappointment? Just name what it was, don't judge it, because that feeling is your starting point. That's where your strategy has to begin. Then ask yourself the second question: what would help me move forward in this state? In other words, we're not talking about moving forward in some ideal future when you're feeling 100% and you get, 5,000 words written in a half an hour. We're talking about what would help you move forward when you're in that state you just described, when you're feeling foggy, overwhelmed, stressed out, whatever it is. The actual moment you're in, what would help? Maybe it's lowering the bar. Maybe it's choosing to do the thing badly or roughly rather than perfectly. Maybe it's switching to something that feels lighter or more intuitive. The answer will be different depending on which quadrant you're in or which kind of inner conflict you're facing. And if you want more support with that, I walk you through all the options in Escape the Writer's Web and Escape the Writer's Web workbook. But even if you just ask those 2 questions this week, that's enough to change the way that you're meeting your writing time. And if you found value in this video, please like and subscribe, or share it with a friend if you think it might help them. I'll see you next time.